Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is George Herrera with the Queens Home Team at Keller Williams Realty. In today's video, I'm going to be covering some questions and information that recently came out from NAR. NAR recently published a consumer guide called Navigating Multiple Offers. So I figured I would do a video about navigating multiple offers, one related directly to specifically for sellers, and then I'll do another video related specifically to buyers, addressing all these different questions when navigating multiple offers. All right, so let's jump right in. So it's laid out with questions like a FAQ, like a frequently asked questions. So it has a question and then they give an answer. I'm going to read the answer, but then give you my input when we relate it to specifically to Queens and Brooklyn and the New York City real estate market. So hopefully you'll get some hyper local info there. All right, so the first question, it says, how can offers differ? So we're talking about navigating multiple offers. How can offers differ? And we're on the seller side. So it says here, while the price of an offer is a key consideration for sellers, it's only one of several elements of an offer. Other factors can include things like financial terms. So that'll be your down payment. A lot of times when you're receiving multiple offers, a lot of the down payments will vary. So some will be, they can be as low as 3.5% down. Some can be 5%, 10% down, 20% down. And sometimes you have high down payments like 40, 50, 60% down offers. So down payments are one of the financial terms that you'll see vary when you're getting offers. Another thing you'll have is contingencies. So when you're navigating through multiple offers on the seller side, so you're receiving offers with different financing terms, right? Which normally is going to be the difference in down payment. And also one of the different financing terms would be conventional versus an FHA loan, or versus like a Sony May loan, a VA loan. So you'll have the different type of loan is also another consideration when navigating the multiple offers. But the most common ones here in Queens and Brooklyn that you'll see are going to be conventional. Most people are going conventional. That's just a conventional loan. And then in some areas you'll see more of FHA loans, and you'll see more of the lower down payment loans like 3.5%, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with them. FHA loans just have different guidelines and different requirements. So there are certain things that you should consider if you do think of going with an FHA loan. There are certain considerations to think about. So that's for financing terms. Now, contingencies is another way that the offers can differ. So contingencies could be your mortgage contingency, so subject to a standard mortgage contingency. Some people waive the mortgage contingency. Appraisal contingency, so normally in a standard contract here, the property has to appraise. That's one of the contingencies. And if the property doesn't appraise, then typically you end up renegotiating. But if for some reason the buyer and seller can't come to an agreement, then the buyer is allowed to get their deposit back and they can walk away from the deal. So that's a standard appraisal contingency. Some buyers are willing to waive the appraisal contingency, or some people do a partial waiver. So that's another thing that you can see here. So contingencies, well, your most typical will be your mortgage contingency, your appraisal contingency. Inspection is somewhat of a contingency, but it's done before attorneys are involved. So it's not really a standard contract contingency. It's more so when they make an offer, you'll be fielding offers on the seller side again, and some offers will say subject to inspection. Most offers will be subject to inspection. And sometimes you'll get offers that are from buyers that are willing to waive the inspection, which means they don't even need to do an inspection. They're ready to go straight to contract. So that's definitely something else that you have to consider when you're fielding multiple offers. So not a contingency, but it is a subject to item that you can see vary when you're fielding offers. Closing timeline is another way that offers can differ. Some people want to close in 3 months. Some people want to close in 2 months. The standard in Queens for residential honor about 60 days. Some people will say we can close in 30 days. It's very rare, but some buyers will, if it's all cash, they will be able to close quicker. Again, that's another financing contingency, right? If they're taking a loan versus not even taking a loan and having all cash. Closing timeline would be on or about 30 days, on or about 60 days. Some buyers are flexible and they'll say, we have a flexible closing timeline. So if you need to find a place, then we're willing to wait. Or if you need an extra month, we're willing to do an on or about 90-day close instead of on or about 60-day close. So closing timeline can definitely be something else to consider. Most will be standard, but every once in a while you will get some offers that have specific details related to their closing timeline, where it's either firm or sooner or later if they're flexible. Then you have earnest money deposits, which that's a way offers can differ, yes, but here it's pretty common. In Queens, Brooklyn, most of the contracts you get, most of the offers that you get, the standard is 10% down at contract. So 10% of the purchase price is typically put down at contract signing, and that's the earnest money deposit that gets deposited into the seller attorney's escrow account. Now, if let's say someone is making an offer for 3.5% down or 5% down, then it might be they won't be able to do the 10% down at contract, so it might be just the 5% or 3.5%, and that's pretty common in those situations. So it can vary how much is put down at contract, and you have to look at the binder, the offer form, to see what each offer, what they're saying they'll put down at contract. Because sometimes we have people that have the 10% down at contract, and some people try to put less. And the amount of money you put as escrow deposit, that's the skin in the game. So that's what the buyer risks losing if they breach the contract at any point. And so we always try to get the 10% if possible. If it's a lower down payment offer, then sometimes we will do less than 10%. Either way, it's something to consider. The amount that will be put down at contract signing, that's the escrow deposit. You have, so that's some of the basic ones that you can look at in terms of how offers can differ when you're fielding multiple offers on the seller side. All right, the next one is, how do I decide which offer is best for me? So this one is where you got to work with your agent to figure out which one is the best, because there's a lot of things to consider, and it's obviously price is important, but aside from price, terms, conditions, timelines, contingencies, all that stuff matters. So definitely that's something, it even says it here, your agent will work with you to help you determine the best offer based on your specific needs and priorities. For example, sellers who want to move as soon as possible may be drawn to the quicker timelines, and some who want more time might be more attracted to the ones that are willing to wait longer. We've seen offers that come in where the buyers will say, you don't have to clear anything out of the house, we'll take care of it. And sometimes that's attractive to some sellers because they don't even have to get it cleaned out. So different things, right? You just want to, there's so many factors to consider when you're handling multiple offers that it really is key to have a good agent that has handled a lot of multiple offer situations, and they'll be able to do all the due diligence, lay it all out on the table, and help you identify which ones are the strongest offers. It's not always the highest price. Sometimes it can be a combination. So now the next thing is, what's a counteroffer? Counteroffer is pretty much when you get your offer, right? You typically, if you're just fielding one offer, you get an offer on your property, you give a counteroffer, and then typically they will give you a counteroffer. So a counteroffer is just a response to an initial offer. So counteroffer would be just giving a rebuttal. It's receiving an offer, and in response to that offer, I'm giving you my offer, my counteroffer, right? So that's the counteroffer. But in multiple offer situations, we typically don't give counter offers. Our team specifically, we typically handle them in a certain way, a certain strategy that we've devised over the last 12 or 13 years of the best way to handle multiple offers on the seller side. And typically it's not with a counter, but every once in a while you might have multiple offers, and the all offers might be below the seller's target price, and in some situations we give everyone the same counter offer, and whoever is willing to give us that price, the acceptable selling price, then that's the person we move forward with. So there are situations where you can give a counter offer in a multiple offer situation, but typically we like to use our strategy because it's been proven to really get the highest price possible and the best terms. So that's what is a counter offer. The next question they have is, how can sellers negotiate multiple offers? So here, when handling multiple offers, sellers may simply accept the best offer or may decide to use a negotiation strategy. So that's like what I was just mentioning. Many times we put a property on the market. It's priced well, move-in ready. It's a really good house, good location, a lot of demand. You can receive multiple offers after the first showings and still be getting calls and people wanting to see it. Now, some agents might advise the seller, you got a good offer, take it, and it's already gone, and those are those ones where I know some buyers get frustrated because a property will hit the market. 2 days later, they call up and they find out it's under contract or it's accepted offer and no more showings or something like that. So that's the scenario where you receive multiple offers and the seller just accepts one, and then they just kind of get it going from there. We like to do the latter, which it says, or the seller may decide to use a negotiation strategy. We always like to do that, especially if there's a lot of activity, a lot of interest. We want to give it the full fair. Not only do we want to give our seller the best chance of getting the best offers with the best terms, but we also want to give all the interested buyers a fair chance to get in, to see the house, and submit their offer for consideration. So whenever we have a lot of activity, if it's really busy, then we like to use a strategy that gives everyone a fair chance to come in to see the house and submit their offer, and it gives our seller a chance to get as many offers in as possible so that we can go with the best one in a reasonable amount of time. We don't go crazy and really get unreasonable with how long. It's just that you want to make sure everyone has a chance. So that's how we handle it. But some sellers may say that price is acceptable for me after the first showings. I want to take that, and it's wrapped up. All right. So the next question is, what is an escalation clause? Now, an escalation clause, they aren't too common here, but on occasion we do receive offers that include escalation clauses. So in short, what it is, an escalation clause is when a buyer makes an offer and their offer beats out the highest offer by a certain amount and usually up to a certain price. So for example, it would be, let's say a property, $700,000 is the price. Let's say their offer is my buyer, so let's say it's an agent making the offer, and they say my buyer's willing to pay $5,000 over your highest offer up to $725 or $730, right? So they'll say, so their offer pretty much is saying they're willing to pay $5,000 over whatever the highest offer is that you have up to a certain price. So let's say up to $725. So that's the cap of it's an escalation clause, and essentially the $725 is their highest and best if it gets to that point. So the way it would work is, let's say you have $700,000 asking price, you have an offer for $690, you have one at full price at $700, and you have a $710 offer. So now, because you have this offer with the escalation clause, right? So that offer could have been, it could have been $695 with the escalation clause, $5,000 over your highest offer up to $725. So let's say we have a $690, $700, and a $710 offer. That offer with the escalation clause, now their offer is $715 because they beat out the $710. The $710, they're willing to go $5 over the highest offer up to $725. So now their offer is $715. Now let's say a new offer comes in at $730. So now the escalation clause takes them up to 725 because that was their max, right? So willing to pay 5,000 over the highest offer up to 725. So actually now they lose out on the property. The 730 offer becomes the highest one, and the escalation is capped. It doesn't go over that price. So that the 730 would be the higher price, right? And if they're again, another one, if it was 720, a new offer, and then there's this escalates to 725, they're still the highest one. But once an offer comes in over the cap of the escalation clause, then many times that's their max offer. And usually what the buyers, the agents will ask for, a good agent will typically ask for proof. The only condition is that they want to see proof of the offer that they had to beat out. So let's say it did end up being the 710 offer was 715. That ends up being the highest offer. Typically, they'll ask to see a copy of the 710 offer just as proof that they did actually beat out a 710, and that's why we're moving forward at 715. So escalation clauses, not too common, but they do happen. We do see them on occasion. The main thing here is that if you're working with an agent, again, we're on the seller side here, your agent has to be able to explain it and negotiate it properly. So not all agents know how to actually negotiate these and present them and escalate them as the offers are changing or increasing. So that's the main thing. But that is how an escalation clause works. It's just escalating by a certain amount over the highest offer up to a certain price. All right, so the next question I have here that it has in the guide is, am I required to make seller concessions when negotiating an offer or when negotiating a contract? And the short answer is no, you are not required to make seller concessions. Seller concessions are something that a seller allows a buyer to do. So a typical seller concession will be where a certain percentage or a certain dollar amount will be added on to the price, onto the agreed price, right? As a concession. Most of the time it's used to cover closing costs, but it could be used to cover repairs. It could be used to cover other fees. So it can be used for different things, but a seller has to allow the buyer to do it. The way it would work is, let's say you have an offer, $700,000 with a $20,000 seller concession, and that's going on top of it. So you always have to ask, is it included in the 700 or on top of the 700? So let's say it's on top of the 700. So now the contract price, the purchase price is going to be 720. That 20 doesn't go to you as the seller. The 20,000 goes to the buyer as a seller concession, and they use that towards closing costs or towards repairs or whatever they have it allotted to. But the 20,000 seller concession, what it does is it allows the buyer to roll in some expenses into their mortgage. So instead of paying the 20,000 out of pocket, they roll it into the loan. So now the loan is based on the whole 720, and they get to keep those funds on hand for whatever the case is, for closing costs, repairs, whatever it would be. So the seller concession, you're not required to give a seller concession. It's something you have to allow the buyer to do, but there's nothing wrong with seller concessions, and in some areas they're very common. I don't think there's really too much wrong with it. It all depends on the scenario, the situation, and the purchase price. The one thing that we always say a seller should consider when you're looking at possibly offering a seller concession is that the property has to appraise for the contract price, which means that if it has a seller concession, now you have to appraise for the higher price. So let's say you had two offers, one at $700,000, no seller concession, and the other one at $700,000 with a $20,000 seller concession. The $700,000 with no seller concession, it only needs to appraise for the $700,000. The $700,000 with the $20,000 seller concession, that one needs to appraise for $720,000. So the risk with offering a seller concession is that you have to appraise for the higher price, the price with the seller concession. Really, it's not an issue if you have the comps there. So if there's plenty of comps to justify the price even with the seller concession included, then it's really not a concern and nothing to be concerned about. You can also negotiate if something does underappraise there, but for the most part, that's the main thing you want to consider when you're thinking of offering a seller concession, is that it will have to appraise for the higher price. So that's the risk with seller concessions. But to answer the question, no, you are not required to make seller concessions when negotiating an offer. It's something that you allow a buyer to do, and that's different from seller credits. Credits are something that goes back to the buyer, and usually that's negotiated. Again, you agree to give a credit to the buyer. So not required to. And then the last one that I have here, the last question from this consumer guide is, can I back out of an offer if I receive a better one? Every state's different, but here in New York, the answer is yes, you can. So the easy way to think about it is that in New York State, no party is legally obligated to the other party until contracts are fully executed. We have a saying when we're negotiating offers is, no offer considered fully accepted until contracts are fully executed. What that means is that until the buyer signs the contract and the seller countersigns, that's the full execution. So buyer signs, seller signs the contract, that's a fully executed contract. Past that point, you have legal obligations now. Up until the contract is fully executed, neither party is legally obligated to the other party. So yes, you could accept an offer. You negotiated multiple offers. You got highest and best. You went with the best one. You scheduled their inspection. That's all moving forward. Meanwhile, a new higher offer comes in. The higher offer is significant. You want to entertain it. So you go with the new offer. Yes, you can. You can back out of the one you're currently going forward with, and you can go with the new offer. Obviously, there's risk there, and there's a certain way it should be handled. But yes, you can go with a new offer with no legal implications. And the same is in reverse. A buyer can also back out until contracts are fully executed. You can have an accepted offer, starting the process. They hear back from an offer they made 2 weeks ago that now they're accepting their offer, and they can withdraw from your property and go for the one that they got. So it happens in both ways, that neither party is legally obligated. So either party can back out up until contracts are signed. They can back out, and you can go with a new offer. A buyer can go with a new house. Now, the one thing to consider with this scenario is that it should be handled in a certain way. Whenever you receive a higher offer, you have to really think about the risk. So it comes down to risk tolerance as well, because you could get a higher offer and it might not be that much higher. So if you already started the process with one buyer, to cancel that and go forward with one where the price is not that significant or the difference is not significant, sometimes that doesn't make sense, and it might just make sense to keep it as a backup offer, continue moving forward with your current deal. Now, if the offer is significantly higher or terms are significantly better, if it is a much better offer, then of course it's natural to want to entertain it. And many of our sellers, when this has happened, they will want to entertain that offer. And usually the way we handle it is that if it is significantly better, we will always try to make it work with the current buyers, meaning we give them a chance to match it. So we'll usually let the current buyers know of what took place, what happened, where we're at, and we'll give them a chance to match it. And if they're willing to match it, then that's the win-win. We keep moving forward with the current buyers. But if for some reason they aren't willing to match it, or we can't make it work, then yes, of course, that at that point the seller has to decide, do you want to stick with the one you have going or go with this new offer? If they go with the new offer, the main thing to consider is that there is risk involved, because again, until contracts are fully executed, right? You can go with the higher offer or the better offer. That deal can fall through. You lose that buyer. Now you go back to the first buyer and they got turned off. They're not interested anymore. So now you lose both buyers. And now you're down to your second backup, which might be a lot less or a lot weaker of an offer. So that's definitely something to think about. We coach our sellers through this all the time, and we talk about it as a team, because it comes down to risk tolerance. It comes down to your primary objective, and it comes down to the offers and the scenario and the different terms to see which is the best strategy if you do get a higher offer or if you do get a better offer after you've already accepted one. Hopefully all that makes sense. I hope this guide was pretty good. Hopefully you get some good information here. I just wanted to take this new consumer guide that they put out for NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors. It's broad and federal, it's national, but I wanted to bring it down to Queens and Brooklyn and kind of how we handle things here. So if you have any questions about any of those questions that I answered, or if you'd like to hear more about any of these strategies that I spoke about, feel free to give us a call. The number and our email should be here. You can email us also. And of course, you can always visit us on our website at queenshometeam.com. We'd be happy to help you in any way possible. Thanks as always for tuning in, y'all. Stay tuned for the next episode. Take care and have a great day.